Hello and welcome to this instructional video by Mandarin Blueprint about how to use Anki, the software that corresponds with our course material to allow you to review in a fraction of the time that you would do if you were just using traditional reviewing methods. So it's important to understand how to use this application because unfortunately it's not particularly obvious how to do a number of things on it, but once you get the hang of it, it actually isn't so hard. So in the previous video, Luke talked about how to install Anki and also how to get a user account. So this video is going to be starting from the position that you have already installed it and you've already made an account. Now, this is how Anki looks, just like this when you first download it, which is to say that at the moment, it's like a structure, but with nothing inside. It's a skeleton of a software. It has a number of things that it could potentially do, but there's no actual content. So we first have to populate it with at least one flashcard deck. And that's how we will be referring to all of the various review flashcard decks in the future. We'll just simply call them a deck. Now, the deck will be labeled here. When there are no decks, it simply has a default one here. This is really just a dummy deck. There's actually nothing here. And then we have do, which says 0. It's very not very bright there, but it does say 0 there. And we have new. It also says 0. And so what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to populate this with at least one deck. Now I have right here the Mandarin Blueprint Pronunciation Mastery Tone Pairs and Drills deck, which you can get from us directly. So once you get this deck from us, you could, or any deck from us for that matter, all you need to do is simply click the file and Anki automatically populates with that file. You'll notice it said 449 cards imported. It happens very quickly. And then a couple of other things happened, which is that we now see that there are new cards available for us to study. Now, you'll notice that there are two rows here. This row that says Mandarin Blueprint Pronunciation Mastery, this is simply a category. This is not a deck in and of itself. Because we end up giving 4 different decks that are related to our Pronunciation Mastery module, it's simply a way to organize this for you in your Anki main screen. Now, you can minimize this if you want. If you had several different decks, the total amount new and total amount due would show up here. But just remember that this first one that says MB Pronunciation Mastery is not actually a deck in and of itself. It's a summary of all the decks in its category. Now this is an actual deck. However, we want to consider the question, do we want to actually study 20 new cards? It's a good question because it depends on the deck really, and we talk about that in our SRS section of the class, Spaced Repetition Software that is. We talk about that in the class, so we'll talk more about that later, but suppose you wanted to just change the amount of new cards that you review every day. Well, it's actually quite easy. You just go over to this cog, click it, and then click Options. Now, under the options, you'll get a drop-down box. And just here, new cards per day, 20 at the moment. We can change it to, say, 5. Suppose you didn't want it to be so much. Now, you'll notice up here, there's this thing called Options Group, and this sentence here that's warning you that you're going to affect multiple decks if you make changes. We have another video later that you can check out that will explain this. But for now, all we're going to do is just change the new cards from 20 down to 5. So we'll just go ahead and hit OK there. And look at that, boom. Changed to 5 new cards. So we're ready to study now. So let's go ahead and actually click the deck. This is how you start to study. Just go ahead and click the deck. You have this little overview page. It's not very important. It's simply just telling you what you're about to get into. You'll notice there's no cards to review because we haven't ever reviewed anything yet. So up at this point, there's simply 5 new cards available. Now this red one called Learning here, this is essentially either a new card that you've reviewed once, but not yet a second time, or a card that you answered incorrectly. So it falls in this category called you're still learning this concept. So we'll take a closer look at that in just a moment, but we'll actually start to study now. So we'll hit the button Study Now. So this is the front of the card. So if you were to imagine a physical flashcard, there would be a front and you would have to answer something and you look at the back and see if you were correct or not. Now, the nice thing about a digital flashcard is that we can have cards like this where the answer is actually in audio form. So this is a pronunciation deck, needless to say, since it's coming from our pronunciation mastery class. So actually the point of this card is not to ask yourself, what does this word mean? We will provide that information as a supplemental fact, but the main point of this card is to properly pronounce this pinyin structure, and also to properly get the tone pairs correct, because the point of this deck is to practice your tone pairs. So what we want to do when we see this, the front of this card, is ask yourself, okay, how do I say this? And then actually speak it out loud. 飞机, 飞机. And then we're going to show answer.
飞机.
Great. So we hear the audio. We have the supplemental word here that it means airplane. However, what we want to just judge ourselves on is whether or not we said it correctly. And that's the thing about Anki that is important to know, is that you always judge yourself. So let's just say we're going to call that one good. And the good is essentially that you got it right, but it wasn't maybe super easy. It was easy enough though. And then of course, again, is if you got it wrong, and you'll notice that if you hit again, it's going to show you in 1 minute. So it's going to show you quite soon. But if you hit good, it's going to remain in the category of learning, the red numbers, and it'll show you again in 10 minutes or when there are no more cards to show. So if we hit good there, now we'll move on to the next card. So you'll notice that now we have 4 new cards to learn and 1 card that we're learning, right? Now we'll do this next one. 分钟. That is the proper way to pronounce this word, but suppose that I said 分钟. If I said that, that would be wrong, and I would flip the card by hitting show answer.
分钟.
And I would hear, oh, I said 分钟. The correct answer is 分钟. So I need to hit again here so that I see it in the future. Now, we're just going to really quickly go through these next 3 so we can see what happens when you finish the new cards. So just really quickly, just go through them. Okay, so now we're back to a point where all we have is learning cards. But a normal question here would be, why do you have 6 instead of 5? Well, the answer is because when I did 分钟, I got it incorrect. And so when you get a new card incorrect, you see it 2 more times instead of just 1 more time. And so this is a good thing to do because, of course, it implies that you were struggling a little bit more with that card. Now, we would go through these again 10 minutes later, or in this case, much less than 10 minutes later because there were only 5 cards. And after you go through all of them again, which we'll just do real quickly just now. So once you get through everything, you'll see this page, which simply says, congratulations, you have finished this deck for now. It's very important to remember that the goal with Anki every day is to get to the end and get to 0. Get to this page where it says, congratulations, you have finished this deck for now, for every deck, because Anki resets every 24 hours. So what this means is that we want to make the amount of new cards that we add per day just right so that it's a little bit of a challenge to get to 0 every day, but it's not overwhelming. It's not too many so that you feel anxious about Anki and you kind of avoid Anki because there's so many cards to do. How many new cards per day that is going to vary with every individual, but we want to get to this place at the end of every day. Now, you'll notice if we go back to the main page, there's nothing due, and we have a little summary of what we did that day. And so doing 5 new cards may only take you a few minutes, right? It may only take you a few minutes. It may take you 10 minutes tops if you're really spending your time on it. So you want to ask yourself, how many hours a day do I want to spend on Anki? And if the answer is, okay, I want to spend 1 hour, then you can consider adding more new cards. But bear in mind, of course, that we're going to be adding more new decks later, so you want to distribute how many new cards you're doing across the several different decks. Now, voila! Through the magic of video editing, we're making it seem like it's the next day now. So this is how the deck would look 1 day later. So you'll notice that now we have 5 new cards, which is the normal setting that we have for each day. But we also have 5 review cards. And why would that be? Well, because the interval when you go through the learning cards the second time, if you select good as your answer, then the interval is 1 day. So what we do when we go in this time is we actually have cards to review. So if you'll notice here, we have to review this card, 医生. Now, if we get it right,
医生
if we get this right, then what we have is a different set of answers now. We have incorrect, we have hard, good, and easy. And so what that means is that we have this new selection called hard. So this is something like if you had to think about it a bit, like you weren't very clear at first exactly how to say it, but then you figured it out and you remembered, oh yes, when I see an SH like that, I want to curl my tongue back and say it sheng, as opposed to how we would normally say an SH in English. But you had to think about it for a bit, so you're going to hit hard. That's one option. Suppose you just got it right and you would hit good. Well, now you'll notice the interval is 3 days. So that means that this memory is now stronger, so you don't need to see it again tomorrow. You can wait a little bit longer before you're reminded. And if you remember when you're reminded 3 days from now, the interval will get even longer. But if at any point that interval got too long and you actually forgot it in between the two intervals, well, you can just hit again, and that will set it back to the beginning, which will allow you to get it back into the cycle of 10 minutes from now, 1 day from now, 3 days from now, 7 days from now, which will allow you to once again bring the fact into your deeper memory. So this is the beauty of Anki. And so every day you'll have these various options for you, but just remember that we always want to get back to 0 by the end of each day. So this is our introduction into the basics of how to review with Anki. And if you'd like to watch the rest of our videos about the various things you can do in the options tab and as well as in the browse tab, please feel free to check out our YouTube page and our Youku page, depending on whether you're in China or overseas. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.